Now let me tell you something, sugar. You ever think you know somebody? Really know them? Like you could close your eyes and still feel they laugh sitting next to you on the couch. And then one day, they do something that makes you feel like you've been sleeping next to a stranger all this time? That's what happened to my friend Vanessa. Now, Vanessa, she's one of them women who make life look good without even trying. Got that kind of smile that light up a room and that kind of backbone that hold it together when the lights go out. 36, corporate job, little natural fro she wear with them gold hoops I keep telling her she can model in. And her man, Malcom, everybody used to say they was goals. You know how folks love to say that. Cute little couple, always at brunch, matching sneakers, laughing like they ain't got a care in the world. From the outside, perfect. But I've been around long enough to know sometimes perfect just mean private pain. Now, this ain't gonna be no sermon, baby. I don't do sermons. I do stories. And this one right here, whew, it's got some bruise. Vanessa and Malcom met at a friend's cookout 5 summers back. He was over there on the grill laughing with them long eyelashes and that smile that said trouble's coming. She walked up talking slick about how he was burning the chicken. He looked up and said, "Then you better come show me how to do it right." And just like that, they've been talking ever since. Now, I liked Malcom at first. Still do in some ways. He's that quiet type. One of them men that think deep before they talk. Always got a plan, always got a playlist ready for the mood. When he looked at Vanessa, you could see he saw her. Not just the hair and hips, but the whole woman. Or so we thought. But see, even good men got shadows they don't talk about. And sometimes those shadows stretch longer than they mean them to. I remember the first time Vanessa hinted something was off. We were sitting at my kitchen table. She had on one of my old robes, looking like somebody's tired auntie, even though she too fine for that. And she goes, "Ruby, do men just stop wanting this sometimes?" Now, I raised an eyebrow. "Wanting what, baby?" She looked at me, rolling her eyes. You know what I mean. See, when a woman starts asking questions like that, she already know the answer. She just hoping you will give her a different one. I told her, some do. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's health, sometimes it's another kind of storm brewing. She just nodded, quiet, but I saw it in her eyes. The confusion mixed with that ache only women understand. That feeling like, did I do something? Am I not enough anymore? And let me tell you, ain't no pain like the one that make you start doubting your own reflection. Now, Vanessa's one of them women who take care of everybody. Always checking on her mama, sending meals to her co-workers, remembering birthdays for folks that don't even like her. But somewhere between taking care of the world, she stopped paying attention to herself. And Malcom, he started changing. Not in that big, dramatic way. No, it was subtle, quiet. The kind of change you only notice when you realize the hugs got shorter and the kisses don't linger long. He was still kind, still funny, but distant, like he was living somewhere inside his own head. Always on that laptop, saying he was working late, saying he was tired, but his eyes told a story his mouth wouldn't. And Vanessa, bless her heart, she tried everything. Cooked his favorite meals, lit candles, bought new lingerie that still had the tag on it when I found it in her closet later. But it was like he was here and not here. One night, she told me she woke up around 2 a.m. and he wasn't in bed. Thought maybe he was in the bathroom. But she found him in the living room, lights off, laptop glowing, headphones on. She said she called his name, but he jumped like a man caught stealing a secret. He slammed the laptop shut and muttered, just watching something, like that made it better. Now, she ain't say nothing that night, just went back to bed, heart heavy as a soaked towel. But you know us women, our silence don't mean we don't see, it mean we collecting evidence. Next day, she called me. "Ruby, something's off. I can feel it." I said, "Baby, you gonna find out soon enough. Just don't go looking for something unless you ready to find it." She sighed. "I just want to know the truth." And I told her, "Then pray you can handle it when it shows up." And Lord, did it show up. 2 weeks later, Malcom left his laptop open while she was printing something for work. And baby, that screen was talking. Search history, bookmarks, saved videos, stuff so explicit it made her stomach turn. It wasn't just casual. It was deep, frequent, obsessive. Now, I ain't here to judge nobody for what they do in private, but when you start choosing fantasy over the person who loves you, that's not pleasure anymore. That's poison. Vanessa said she felt her chest go hollow. It was like finding out the person I share a bed with been living a whole other life without me. She sat there for an hour just staring at the screen, scrolling, tears dripping down her hands. She told me later, "Ruby, I wasn't mad at the women. I was mad that he made me compete against ghosts. I can't win against pixels." And baby, that line right there, whew, that one stuck with me. Because that's what betrayal does. It don't just break your heart. It makes you question the mirror. So, that's where it all started. The night her man's laptop told the truth. And I'll tell you right now, the truth got a nasty way of changing everything it touches. But don't you worry, I'm going to tell you what she did with it. Because Vanessa didn't crumble. She burned and rebuilt. Now listen, Vanessa ain't the kind of woman who snoops. She's old school, respectful, believes in privacy, believes in trust. She'll tell you in a minute, if I gotta go looking, that already means something's broken. But that morning, she wasn't looking. The truth just showed up. See, Malcom left to work early, rushed out the door, kiss on the forehead, same old see you tonight, babe. Nothing unusual. But his laptop was still on the kitchen counter. Vanessa had a work presentation coming up and needed to print a few slides. She says she clicked one button, baby. One button, and her whole world shifted. The printer froze, the screen glitched, and a window popped open. At first, she didn't even understand what she was seeing. Then the titles started to register. Dirty, violent, specific things she didn't even know people filmed. Hundreds of tabs, folders, bookmarks, names she didn't recognize, but faces that all looked like some version of a fantasy he'd never told her about. And it wasn't just one night's mistake. She clicked history. It scrolled for pages, weeks, months, years. She said, "Ruby, my stomach turned cold, like the air left the room." You ever been betrayed in silence? That moment when you find the thing you can't unsee, can't unknow, but there's nobody there to witness it with you? That's where she was. All that love she built her home on started to feel like wet cement under her feet. She didn't cry right away, nah. She went numb. She sat down at the kitchen table and stared at that screen while her coffee went cold. Click after click, each one like a paper cut to her heart. The clock said 9:47 a.m., but time didn't mean nothing. She told me later she felt like she'd been living with a hologram, like he was real in body but not in spirit. She closed the laptop, walked to the mirror in the hallway and just looked at herself, her face, her body, her hair still tied up in that satin scarf. And then the tears came. Ugly ones from the gut, not because of what he watched, but because of what it meant. "It wasn't even the porn, Ruby," she said through the phone that night. "It was the secrecy, the lying by silence. He made me feel like I was the one he had to hide from." Now, I ain't no saint, baby. I done lived long enough to know plenty of men watch porn, some women too. But there's a difference between curiosity and dependence, between exploration and escape. And Malcom, he wasn't just watching. He was drowning. That man had been using it like medicine to numb himself. And the cruel thing about numbing is it don't just block pain. It blocks love too. When Malcom came home that night, Vanessa was sitting on the couch, lights off, laptop open like evidence in a courtroom. He walked in, froze, and I swear she said his eyes told the whole story before his mouth even opened. He started babbling. "It's not what you think. I'm sorry. It's just stress." But she cut him off. "Don't lie to me, Malcom. Please, don't make this worse." He tried to sit down. She stood up, tears in her eyes, but voice steady. "Do you realize what you've done to me? What this does to us? You've been making love to your computer more than you've touched me in months." He opened his mouth again, but she wasn't done. "Do you know what it's like to wonder what's wrong with you? To stand in front of a mirror and pick yourself apart, trying to figure out why your husband would rather stare at strangers and look at you?" And baby, when she told me that later, I had to sit still for a minute because I felt that in my bones. Now, Malcolm, bless his heart, he broke. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just crumbled right there on the carpet and said, I have a problem. And in that moment, she didn't know whether to comfort him or scream. Because when the man who hurt you starts crying, your instincts get confused. Half of you remember the love and the other half remember the lie. She told him, I need space. He begged, he promised, but she walked to the bedroom, shut the door, and sat there on the floor until the sun came up. She called me early the next morning, voice hoarse, soul empty. Ruby, she said, I feel dirty, like I've been living inside somebody else's secret. And I told her, baby, you not dirty. You just covered in the dust of somebody else's shame. See, shame spreads. It don't stay where it starts. And Malcolm's had started years before hers, but now it was sitting heavy in her chest too. Now weekend she came over. Didn't bring nothing but an overnight bag and a silence I could feel from the doorway. I made her tea, sat her down, and she just started talking. I don't even know if I'm mad, Ruby. I just erased. Like he built a whole world where I don't exist. And that's the thing about betrayal. It don't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, you were never enough. And that whisper can break even the strongest woman down. Now, she didn't leave right away. Some folks think soon as you find something like that, you pack up and go, but it ain't that simple when you love somebody. Love complicates logic. And when you share years, bills, and a bed, it ain't easy to just unlove them overnight. So she stayed, at least for the moment. But that staying, that wasn't surrender. It was survival. I told her, you can't heal what you won't name, baby. You found the truth. Now the question is, what you gonna do with it? And she said, I don't know yet, but I know I can't go back to pretending. And that was the start of her becoming somebody new. Because that's the thing about truth, baby. It's heavy, but it's also holy. It ruins what's fake so the real can finally breathe. And from that night on, Vanessa's breathing changed. It hurt to inhale, but she was finally breathing honesty.
You know that sound when glass breaks? How it's quick, sharp, and then you hear them tiny bits rolling across the floor long after the shatter's done? That's what betrayal sounds like in the soul. The break happens once, but the echo keeps coming for days, weeks, months. That was Vanessa. That woman was living in the echo. The morning after she found Malcolm's secret, she didn't even go to work. She called in sick, though really, she was heartsick. She sat on the couch with her phone in her hand, thumb hubbing over my name for an hour before she finally called me. Her voice was small, shaky. Ruby, what do you do when the person you love becomes the reason you don't trust yourself anymore? And I'll be honest with you, baby, I ain't had no quick answer. 'Cause that's a question only life can teach you. You can't Google that. So I said, you breathe, you eat something, you drink some water, then you cry till you can't see straight. After that, you start figuring out who you are without his lies sitting on your chest. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I don't even know where to start. And I said, start where it hurts. When Malcolm came home the next night, the house was different. You know that shift you feel when somebody's spirit packs up before their body does? That's what he walked into. She was upstairs, packing. Not leaving yet, but moving some things into the guest room. Creating space, emotional triage. He came up, voice soft. Vanessa, can we talk? She didn't look at him. Talk about what, Malcolm? How long you been living in a fantasy while I've been holding down real life?" He rubbed his hands together like he could wring the guilt out. "It's not about you. It's just, I've been dealing with this since before I met you. It's how I cope." She turned then, and baby, I wish you could have seen her face. Eyes swollen but fierce. "Don't you dare tell me it's not about me. Maybe it didn't start with me, but it sure as hell landed in my lap. You think your addiction don't touch me? It touches everything." He looked like he'd been slapped, but she wasn't wrong. They sat there in silence for a while, him on the edge of the bed, her standing by the dresser, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. Then she said, "I just need to understand. Was it me? Did I do something? Did I change?" Now, I wasn't there, but she told me later. His face crumpled. He said, "No, Ness, you didn't do anything. I feel broken sometimes. Like I don't know how to be close without pressure." And that's the first time she saw the boy in the man. That scared little boy who learned to hide his pain instead of talking about it. That's the thing about addiction. It don't start with lust. It starts with loneliness. But see, Vanessa couldn't feel sympathy yet. Her wound was still fresh. She just said, "You should have told me that instead of making me feel invisible." And then she left him sitting there in his shame while she went to the guest room to sleep. Now, baby, I know folks love to talk about forgiveness like it's a light switch. Flip it and move on. But forgiveness ain't clean like that. It's messy. It's muddy. It's slow. And Vanessa was still knee-deep in the mud. She started pulling away in every way she could. Stopped texting him during the day. Stopped kissing him goodbye. When he tried to touch her, she flinched. Not out of anger, but out of grief. He'd say, "I'm still me." And she'd say, "No, you who you been hiding all this time. I just finally met him." Whew, baby. That line right there, it broke me when she said it. Because sometimes that's what betrayal does. It introduces you to a stranger wearing your lover's face. Weeks went by like that. They tried talking, but every conversation turned into a fight or a wall. She'd ask questions. When did it start? How often? Why didn't you tell me? And he'd get defensive. It's not that deep. You overreacting. You know how that goes. Denial, deflection, guilt hiding behind pride. I told her one night, baby, you can't argue with a man's shame. He got to look it in his eye himself. But that didn't make the nights any easier. She told me she'd lay awake listening to him breathe in the next room, and it felt like being haunted by someone who wasn't even dead. Then one night, it all came out ugly. She had a long day, came home, found him watching TV like nothing happened. And something in her snapped. She said, "How can you sit there like everything's fine?" He looked at her, tired. "Because if I don't, Ness, I'll lose my mind." She laughed, a hard, bitter sound. "You already lost something. You just don't realize it yet." They went back and forth. Her voice got loud. His stayed quiet, too quiet. Then she screamed, "Do you even love me anymore?" And he said, "I do, but I don't know how to be what you need right now." That's when she threw the remote across the room. It hit the wall, battery flying out. She dropped to her knees and sobbed. Not dramatic movie tears, the real kind, the ones that sound like a wound learning its own name. When she told me about that night, she said, "I didn't recognize myself, Ruby. I'm not the woman who throws things, but I felt like I was fighting for my own reflection." And I told her, "That's because you were. When a man breaks your trust, it's not just him you stop believing in, it's yourself. And baby, that's the part that takes the longest to fix. After that fight, Malcolm packed a bag and stayed with his brother for a few days. Not because she kicked him out, but because he knew she needed air. And she did. The house felt strange without him, but quieter, safer somehow. She told me she'd sit on the couch with a blanket, staring at the dent in the cushion where he used to sit. And she realized the silence didn't hurt as bad as the lies did. That was the beginning of her reclaiming her peace. See, baby, when trust cracks, it don't just break between two people. It echoes through your whole life. It makes you question your instincts, your worth, your body, your mind. But if you listen real close to that echo, sometimes it's not just pain you hear. Sometimes it's the sound of yourself saying, enough. And that's what Vanessa started hearing. She wasn't ready to leave yet, but she was ready to stop begging for a version of love that kept shrinking her.
Vanessa always been a confident woman. Walked in a room like she belonged there, 'cause she did. You could hear her laugh before you saw her, big and rich like brown sugar and hot coffee. She used to say, "Ruby, I ain't the prettiest girl in the world, but baby, I know how to shine." But after that discovery, that shine dimmed. She started picking herself apart in the mirror. Not just her body, her spirit, her confidence, her womanhood, her sense of enough. See, when the man who once looked at you like you hung the moon starts getting his life from screens full of strangers, it messes with you in ways you don't expect. She called me one night, whispering like she was confessing a crime. "Ruby, I watched some of that stuff he was watching." I sat up in bed. "Why would you do that, baby?" She said, "I just wanted to understand what it was that I'm not." Now my heart broke right there, because that's what betrayal does. It turns curiosity into self-punishment. She said, "They all look perfect. Smooth skin, long hair, no stretch marks, no nerves. They do things I don't even have names for." I told her, "Baby, that ain't real. That's choreography with good lighting. But you're real. You bleed, you cry, you love, you live. That's more sacred than any fantasy." She laughed bitter. "Tell that to Malcom." And I said, "Oh, I would. But right now, I need you to tell it to yourself." The next few weeks were rough. She started wearing makeup to bed, bought new lingerie, tighter dresses, higher heels, like she was auditioning to be wanted again. And when Malcom came home from his brother's place, he noticed. "You look different," he said. She smiled, that tired kind of smile that don't reach the eyes. "Do I?" He nodded. "Now I don't have to do that." She said, "Do what?" "Try to compete with ghosts," he whispered. And that's when she realized he knew she was spiraling, but he didn't know how to catch her, and she didn't know how to stop falling. You ever see somebody look fine but hollow? That was Vanessa. She still went to work, still posted pictures, still showed up to brunch like everything was cute. But when I looked at her, I saw the crack behind the lipstick. She'd sit in my kitchen, stirring her coffee slow. "Ruby, I can't even look at him the same. When he touches me, I start wondering what he's picturing, if he's seeing me or them." And I said, "That's not paranoia, baby. That's trauma trying to find a shape." She tried talking to her friends about it, but most of them didn't get it. One said, "Girl, all men do that. Don't take it so personal." Another said, "You should leave. If he's watching that, he's basically cheating." Vanessa just nodded, but later told me, "It's like nobody knows how to sit with the middle ground. Either I'm crazy for staying or weak for leaving." And I told her, That's 'cause people love simple stories, but real life is complicated, baby. Messy, gray, and full of contradictions. Ain't nothing weak about taking time to figure out your own piece. The nights were the hardest. She said, Ruby, I can't even turn the lights off when we're in bed. I start imagining him watching them women again. I feel like I'm just a stand-in. And that right there, that's the quiet erosion of intimacy. It don't happen in a loud breakup scene. It happens when trust leaves the room and takes comfort with it. She lay there stiff, pretending to be asleep while he turned over and sighed. Both of them awake, both of them lonely, right next to each other. Now, baby, let me tell you something real clear. Addiction ain't about desire. It's about escape. And Malcolm wasn't escaping from her. He was escaping from himself. But when a man don't face his demons, they start biting the people who love him. And that's what was happening. Eventually, she told him, I think we need help, real help. I can't carry both of us. He hesitated, then said, "You right." And that's how they ended up in therapy. At first, it was awkward. She said the therapist's office smelled like peppermint and sadness. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, answering questions like strangers on a first date. The therapist asked Malcolm to describe his relationship with porn. He looked down and said, "It's comfort." Vanessa swallowed hard. "Comfort?" He nodded. "When I'm stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, it's a release. It's not about anyone else." And she said, "But it hurts someone else." That was the first honest conversation they'd had in months. Week after week, they kept going. Some sessions ended in silence, some in tears. But for the first time, Malcolm wasn't hiding, and Vanessa wasn't pretending. The therapist told him healing isn't about punishment, it's about responsibility. And that stuck with Vanessa, because deep down, she didn't want to destroy him, she just wanted him to see her again. One night after therapy, they sat in the car. Neither said a word for a while. Then Malcolm whispered, "I miss us." And she said, "I miss the version of us that didn't make me question my worth." He nodded, eyes wet. "I'll do anything to get her back." And she said, "Start with yourself." But still, baby, progress ain't linear. Some days she feels strong, hopeful even. Other days, one small thing, him checking his phone too long or not touching her right away, would drag her right back into doubt. Healing is like that. 2 steps forward, 1 heartbreak back. One afternoon, she came by my house again. Curl is in her hair, eyes swollen from crying. "Ruby, I'm tired. I love him, but I'm tired of loving somebody I gotta monitor." And I put my hand over hers and said, "Then stop monitoring, baby. Start deciding. Decide what peace costs and what you're willing to pay for it." She looked at me for a long time, and that night she finally made a decision. Not to leave, not to stay, but to draw a line. Because see, sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can say ain't goodbye. It's not like this. Now, baby, I'm going to tell you something I've learned watching people for as long as I've been alive. Every secret's got a seed, and every habit, especially the ones that hurt, starts off as a comfort before it becomes a cage. That was Malcolm. When Vanessa and Malcolm started therapy, that first month was rough. Vanessa showed up angry, Malcolm showed up ashamed. They sat on that couch like 2 folks waiting at opposite ends of a bus stop. The therapist, older sister type, silver locks, eyes that see through your excuses, she didn't rush nothing. She just said, "Malcolm, tell me where this started." He stared at the floor, fingers knotted, silence so thick you could hear the wall clock breathing. Finally, he said, "I was 12. See, Malcolm grew up in a house where feelings weren't welcome. His daddy worked nights, his mama was tired and strict, church every Sunday, rules every day. You know the type. Don't talk back, pray it away, men don't cry.
One day, one of the older boys from the block showed him a magazine, one of them old glossy ones that smell like ink and trouble. He said it was the first time he felt seen, not by the women, but by the feeling, the control, the quiet escape. He didn't have no one to talk to about the things stirring up in him, so that magazine became his teacher, his comfort, his friend. Every time he felt scared, lonely, or angry, he'd go back to it. And over the years, baby, that turned into a pattern. Not about lust, about control, about having one thing in a world that didn't ask nothing of him. He said, when my mama yelled, I sneak off to the basement. When my dad ignored me, I find a screen. That screen became a place where he could forget how small he felt. And that right there, baby, is how shame gets born. Quiet, invisible, generational. It don't start dirty. It starts lonely. Vanessa sat there listening, tears rolling but no words, because she could see it now. Not just her husband, but the little boy inside him who never got to talk about what he was feeling. But here's the thing. Understanding don't erase the hurt, and she told him that straight up. She said, Malcom, I'm sorry that happened to you. I really am. But your pain don't give you the right to wound me too. And baby, that was the first time he looked her in the eye in months. He nodded slow and said, I know. I'm just trying to figure out how to stop. Now, this ain't one of them quick fix stories. He didn't get cured after one therapy session. Nah, healing slower than that. It took him months to even admit that his addiction wasn't just a bad habit. It was a hole he'd been feeding instead of filling. He started going to a men's recovery group. At first, he didn't want to. Told Vanessa it was corny. But she told him, then be corny. Just don't keep being broken. So he went. And for the first time in his life, he sat in a circle with other men talking about things they've been hiding since middle school. Fathers who weren't there, mothers who were too tired to notice, pressure to be strong all the time. And one night he came home from that meeting and told Vanessa, I didn't even know other men felt like this, like ashamed for not being enough. And she said, soft, now you know how I feel too. That was the start of something different between them. Not fixed, but honest. They began talking without trying to win. One night she asked, what does it feel like when you want to watch it? He said, like I'm empty, like I can't reach you or me, and I don't know how to sit in that emptiness without feeling it. She said, then maybe we need to learn how to sit in it together. Ooh, baby. That's when I knew Vanessa had stepped into her power. 'Cause forgiveness ain't weak, it's courageous. But it ain't free either. Now, let me be clear. Vanessa didn't excuse his addiction. She gave him a condition. She said, if you want this marriage, you get a therapist, an accountability partner, and full transparency. No more secret screens, no more lies. You want privacy? You earn it back with honesty. And he agreed. Not because he had to, but because he finally wanted to. It wasn't easy, though. He slipped up once about a month later, came clean the next day, said he washed again after a stressful week. She didn't scream, didn't pack up. She said, thank you for telling me. Now tell your therapist. And that, baby, was growth. 'Cause love without accountability ain't love, it's enablement. The more they talked, the more Vanessa learned that his addiction wasn't about her body, her beauty, or her worth. It was about his fear of vulnerability. And the more he learned, the more he realized that porn wasn't pleasure anymore. It was poison disguised as comfort. That's when he said to her one night, I used to think I was escaping pressure, but I was escaping love. And she said, well, now you got to learn how to handle both. I remember Vanessa telling me, Ruby, for the first time, I feel like I'm talking to the man I married, not the mask he wore. And I told her, that's what truth does, baby. It strips the costume off love and asks if you still want it naked. So, no, Malcom wasn't a monster. He was a man hiding in shame, like a lot of them are. And Vanessa wasn't a victim. She was a woman learning that compassion and boundaries can live in the same heart. And when those two truths finally met, that's when healing started to whisper in that house again.
You ever notice how healing don't come with fireworks? It just sneaks in. Like one day you wake up and realize you didn't cry yourself to sleep last night. Or that you made coffee and it actually tasted like peace instead of survival. That's how it started for Vanessa. Quiet, slow, but real. Months had passed since that night she moved into the guest room. Malcom was still going to therapy, still checking in with his group. And Vanessa, well, she started going to therapy for herself. Not couples therapy, not fix him therapy. Her therapy. Because, baby, you can't rebuild trust with somebody else until you rebuild it with yourself. I remember her calling me after her second solo session. She said, "Ruby, my therapist asked me who I am outside of Malcom." I couldn't answer. And I said, "That's your homework then, baby. Go find that woman." So she started doing things she hadn't done in years. Took a pottery class, started walking every morning before sunrise, rejoined the church choir. She said singing again felt like remembering her own name. Now, don't get it twisted. Malcom was still around. They were trying, but things were different now. Vanessa didn't tiptoe around him anymore. She didn't shrink herself to protect his shame, and she sure didn't dress up in forgiveness before he'd earned it. No, baby, she gave him the gift of her truth, not her silence. One night, they were sitting at dinner, the kind of quiet meal that used to feel awkward. But this time, she looked him right in the eye and said, "Malcom, I love you, but if you ever lie to me again, that love becomes a memory, not a promise." He nodded. Malcom started changing too, not in a dramatic Hollywood way. He got off social media for a while, set up filters on his phone, started journaling when he felt tempted. But the biggest change was this. He started talking about his day, his fears, his stress, the things he used to bury under a browser tab. He started laying out in the open. And Vanessa noticed. She said, "It's weird, Ruby. The more honest he gets, the less angry I feel." And I told her that's 'cause anger don't need a place to live once truth moves in. Then came the test. Always does, right when you think you're good. They was at a friend's cookout, laughing, eating ribs, music playing. Malcom went inside to grab something from the kitchen, left his phone on the table. Vanessa saw it buzz. For a second, that old reflex came back, the one that says, "Check it." She even reached for it. But then she stopped, took her hand back, and said to herself, "If I have to go looking for peace, it ain't real peace." Whew, that's growth, baby. Not because she suddenly trusted him, but because she trusted herself again. Later that night, she told him what happened. She said, "I almost looked at your phone." He said, "Why didn't you?" And she said, "Because I realized I don't want to live in suspicion anymore. I'm too tired for that." He reached across the table, held her hand. He said, "I don't want you to either." And for the first time, she believed him. Not because of words, but because of consistency. See, people think love is proved in the grand gestures, the flowers, the apologies, the promises. But nah, baby, love is in the daily maintenance. It's in the ordinary choices, telling the truth, showing up, listening even when it's uncomfortable. And that's what Malcom has started doing. But let me tell you what really sealed it for Vanessa. One day, she came home from work and found a letter on the kitchen table. Her name written on it in Malcom's handwriting. She opened it, and it said, "Vanessa, I can't undo what I did, but I want to be the kind of man who doesn't hide anymore. You deserve a love that's present, not performing. Thank you for not giving up on me when I couldn't face myself. I'm still learning, but I'm learning because of you." She told me she cried so hard she had to sit on the floor. Not because the letter fixed everything,
but because it finally acknowledged everything. And acknowledgement, baby, that's the soil where trust can grow again. From then on, things weren't perfect, but they were true. Vanessa stopped counting his mistakes and started measuring his effort. And Malcom stopped performing guilt and started practicing integrity. That's how they stayed together, not through fantasy, but through realism. Now, Vanessa did tell me one thing I never forgot. She said, Ruby, I didn't stay because I was afraid to be alone. I stayed because I was finally strong enough to choose it, and I chose growth. And I said, that's all any of us can do, baby. Choose growth over fear. So no, she didn't leave him, but she sure as hell didn't stay the same. She learned to love with open eyes and firm boundaries. She learned that healing don't mean forgetting. It means remembering without reliving. And most of all, she learned that her worth was never up for negotiation.
It was a Sunday morning, the kind that comes dressed in soft light and the smell of coffee. Vanessa was sitting on the porch with a robe on, hair tied up, journal in her lap. Malcom was still asleep inside. The world was quiet, birds humming, breeze moving through the trees like a sigh. And she told me later, Ruby, I didn't even realize I was humming. Just sitting there, writing and humming. That's when I knew I was okay. You see, freedom don't always announce itself loud. Sometimes it comes in the smallest ways. When you look at your reflection and see peace where pain used to be. When you stop rehearsing the arguments in your head. When you finally stop explaining yourself to people who never tried to understand you. That's what happened to Vanessa. She'd spend months rebuilding her routines. Therapy on Tuesdays, choir on Thursdays, date nights on Fridays when she felt like it. She stopped trying to be perfect and started practicing being present. And baby, presence is power. One afternoon, she came by my place with that big smile again, the one I thought she'd lost. I said, well, look at you, glowing like you ain't been through hell and back. She laughed. Oh, I've been through hell, Ruby. I just redecorated while I was there. Ooh, I hollered so loud the neighbors probably thought I was crazy. But that right there, that's a woman who made peace with her own story. We sat out back, drank lemonade, and she told me how things had changed. She said, Malcolm's still in therapy. I still have days with the old fear knocks on the door, but now I don't invite it in. I just nod and let it pass. I said, that's called living, baby. Not pretending nothing happened, just not letting it run your house no more. Now, before you think this turned into some fairy tale ending, let me be clear. They ain't perfect. They still argue, still get quiet sometimes. But the difference is the silence now don't feel like punishment. It feels like space. And that space is what saved them. One day she said to me, Ruby, I used to think love was about keeping somebody. Now I know it's about keeping yourself while you love somebody. And I said, well, go ahead and preach, Reverend Vanessa. She rolled her eyes, laughing. I learned from the best. See, baby, the thing about betrayal is it'll teach you who you are when the mirror cracks. Vanessa found out she was more than forgiven, more than strong. She was free. Free from the need to prove, to please, to perform. Free from the voice that told her she wasn't enough. Free from the weight of somebody else's shame. She told me about a moment in church one Sunday. The choir was singing, His Eye is on the Sparrow, and she just started crying. Not the sad kind, the release kind. She said, for the first time I felt light, like I finally put down a suitcase I've been carrying for years. And I told her, that's the day your heart clocked out of survival mode. Now, Malcom, he noticed the change too. He told her one night, you seem happier, even when I'm not the reason. And she smiled, touched his cheek and said, that's the point, baby. My happiness can include you, but it don't depend on you. He nodded. I like that woman.
And she said, so do I. And that's the real ending, baby. Just two people sitting in honesty, trying again, this time with eyes wide open. If you ask me, the story ain't about porn or even betrayal. It's about truth, about the courage to face what's ugly without letting it define your beauty, about learning that love ain't just a feeling, it's a practice. And sometimes the bravest kind of love is the one you give yourself first. So when my little sister type friends come to me crying because they just found something on their man's phone or caught a secret they didn't ask for, I tell them, baby, don't rush to leave or to stay. Just stand still long enough to hear yourself think. You can't rebuild trust if you abandon yourself in the process. And that's what Vanessa did. She stopped abandoning herself. Last time I saw her, she hugged me tight and said, Ruby, I'm not the same woman that called you that night. I'm stronger, softer too. I learned healing don't make you hard, it just makes you honest. And I said, well, look at you, baby. That's freedom talking. So yeah, that's the story of a woman who loved a man, got broken, then rebuilt herself brick by beautiful brick. Of a man who learned that shame can't be healed in the dark. Of two people who didn't find perfect love, but found true love, the kind that breathes, the kind that forgives, the kind that grows. And most of all, the story of a sister who sat on her porch one quiet morning humming to herself, finally free. Now, baby, go pour yourself a glass of something cold. And remember, sometimes life don't give you happy endings. It gives you true ones, and that's better. I hope something in all that found a place in you, made you think or maybe breathe a little easier about the things you've been carrying. You know me, I got a whole basket of stories just like this one, about love and loss, about learning and living. So don't be a stranger, all right? Come on back next time. Bring your tea, your questions, your heart. And when you do, I'll be right here on this old couch telling the truth the way I know how. Soft where it needs to be, sharp where it matters, and always with love. Until then, keep your peace close, your boundaries firm, and your joy louder than your doubts. I'll see you next time, baby.